Well, I think if we continue on this pace, we are likely to undershoot the growth target. So I think it's fair to say that we are expecting, or at least authorities themselves are expecting to pump in more stimulus for the second half this year. But I think what's important to note, which is what you noted before, which is the unevenness, right? And because it's uneven, that essentially rules out any big stimulus, we think, that could come in the second half of this year, because that's not really the right way to address the difficulties that the economy faces. The retail sales figures that just broke as you were speaking, there are some seasonality around that number, but that, even accounting for that, that's a pretty dire number. And I think given the trajectory of consumption stimulus, which is, next to nothing, very, very modest, given the trajectory of consumer confidence, given the trajectory of savings rates, which will also come out today, we are expecting that, the consumer sentiment will stay quite weak.
Right.
And what that means is that there is no sign of a visible turnaround for the second half of this year.
Louise, I want to scratch that point, because you're saying that looking at these numbers, you might think that they would miss their targets for the full year, which is almost 5%. Now, for the first half, they've done on the dot 5%, right? This quarter has come in at 4.7%. What makes you believe that they would be undershooting that level?
Well, sequentially.
And where would that number come ultimately for the year?
Well, our expectations is that would come. So our expectations for Q2 was around 4.8%. So it's a slight undermiss for us. And for the full year, if you think about sequential growth, it does seem like we're at almost half the pace of it was in Q1. So the economy is really decelerating quite rapidly. And if that continues in the second half of this year, where we expect rising tariff risk, so exports might not really be a cyclical boon anymore in the second half of this year. And then we're expecting also that businesses, having ramped up production in the first half of this year, they might start to pull back. They might start to run down their inventories. That would also impact some of the growth momentum that we saw in the first half, not really translating to the second half.
But haven't they hedged themselves by saying almost 5%?
Yes, so the around 5% target is helpful.
Around 5%.
But I think investors clearly look at it as a stricter threshold than really the around 5%. And given the kind of narrative around what the authorities are saying in a press conference today, around the fact that growth remains quite robust, quite decent, I think the expectation from policymakers are still that they should get 5%.
Okay.